Welcome to this brief video on the properties of herbs in traditional Chinese herbal medicine. The properties of Chinese herbs are determined according to the following characteristics: the 4 natures, the 5 flavors, their tropism, the 4 movements or directions, and finally toxicity. The first characteristic we consider is their nature or temperature. In Chinese, the 4 natures are called Si Qi. Qi, which is often translated as energy, is a word with multiple interpretations according to context, and in this case it is related to the ability to heat or cool. The 4 basic properties are hot, warm, cool, and cold. But as you can see from this list, there's also an additional property of neutral. The classic book, the Huangdi Jing, in its chapter, The Great Theory of Crucial Principles, states the principle of warming what is cold and cooling what is hot, and it is this balancing principle that a doctor needs to seek when treating a patient. Here are some examples of Chinese herbs that illustrate these properties. As you see, the 4 basic properties can further be distinguished by their degree. For example, the herb can be slightly warm or slightly cold. Rou Gui is Chinese cinnamon bark or cassia bark, and its nature is hot. In the Chinese pharmacopoeia, the twig of the cinnamon plant, gui zhi, is also used, and in this case its nature is warm. This shows that different parts of the plant may have different natures in Chinese herbal medicine. Fresh ginger rhizome is slightly warm in nature. It's good at inducing sweat. Dried ginger rhizome, on the other hand, is considered to be hot and has a much stronger internal heating effect. This shows that the way that herbs are prepared can also alter their nature. Juhua, or chrysanthemum flower, is slightly cold in nature and can be used for fever with headache. Huangqin, or the root of Baikal skullcap, is cold in nature and has been used for certain cases of diarrhea and dysentery. In general, plants with a hot or warm nature warm the body and help to circulate the blood. They disperse cold and tonify the body fire to help the young. On the negative side, they have a drying effect and can damage body fluids if used in the wrong way or in the wrong situations. Plants with a cool or cold property treat heat and reduce fire. They cool the blood while eliminating toxins, but they can also provoke stagnation. So the nature of medicinal may depend on which part of the plant we're considering. As we noticed with cassia cinnamon, the twigs have a slightly different nature to the bark. Its nature may also depend on its preparation. For example, some herbs such as shu di huang are prepared in wine, and that gives the herb a warmer nature than its raw form, sheng di huang, which is cold in nature. Curiously, in TCM the nature of medicinal may also depend on its form. For instance, sugar in its crystalline form is regarded as cooling, while powdered sugar is considered to be warming. This is why juhua cha, or chrysanthemum tea, a cooling tea, is offered in the summer with crystalline sugar. On the basis of this classification, we can also look at the nature of a formula and ensure in this way that it is suitable for the state of the patient. Next, we look at the 5 flavors. This categorization is closely related to the 5 transformations in Chinese cosmology. I prefer not to use the term 5 elements, which implies a static system rather than a process. The 5 transformations are more of a metaphor of relationship and change inspired by seasonality. There are 5 main flavors: sour, bitter, sweet, acrid, and salty. These flavors are associated with the 5 transformations as shown in this diagram. Sour corresponds to wood, bitter corresponds to fire, sweet corresponds to earth, Acrid corresponds to metal, salty corresponds to water. We will look at each flavor in turn. Sour corresponds to wood and is astringent and consolidating. Sudden healthy functions can become excessive in disease and start to weaken the body. We can think of this as a loss or leakage of our body resources, such as fluids or qi. An example of this could be limiting excessive sweating after a fever through astringency. Diarrhea in the later stages of a disease can also be thought of as a form of leakage of fluids, leading to dehydration. Needless to say, herbs with this property should be used appropriately in those circumstances. Baishao, or white peony root, is an example of a sour herb used to stop leakage. It stops spontaneous perspiration and preserves yin. Bitter dries damp and drains. It lowers adverse rising qi. It clears, purges, and disperses fire. It stimulates bowel movements. A herb in this category is huanglian or Coptis rhizome. It is bitter and cold and drains fire. It treats heat and damp. Sweet nourishes and harmonizes. It replenishes and moistens. It relieves spasms and pain and harmonizes the effects of diverse herbs in a formula. Ganzao, or licorice root, is sweet. It tonifies the spleen and helps overcome qi and blood deficiency. It also harmonizes the effects of diverse herbs in formulas. The acrid or pungent flavor is dispersing. It promotes the movement of qi and blood, and as a result will promote perspiration, so it is particularly useful in situations involving stagnation. Shengjiang, or fresh ginger, is acrid and warm and is effective at dispersing cold. The salty flavor is associated with softening and eliminating of hard lumps such as nodules, goiter, and scrofula. Seaweeds are salty, and in Chinese medicine, haizao or sargassum seedweed has the property of softening masses, reducing edema, and treating scrofula. Additionally, there is a bland or neutral flavor, which is associated with removal and transformation of dampness by encouraging urination. Fuling is a root fungus that is commonly added to formulas to eliminate dampness. In general, the acrid and sweet flavors have a more outward, dispersing quality and are considered to be yang flavors. On the other hand, sour, bitter, and salty flavors have a more draining, downward, and inward quality and are considered to be yin flavors. The bland or neutral flavor is regarded as draining and yang in nature. It is useful to examine the overall effects of flavors in a formula to assess its properties. In the case of Xiao Chai Hu Tang, one can note the balance achieved in terms of draining, dispersing, and nourishing. Although we talk about the 5 flavors, ancient texts mention other flavor qualities. Among the additional tastes mentioned are bland and neutral, as we have discussed, aromatic, which is close to dispersing, and is particularly relevant to Western culinary herbs and essential oils, and penetrating, which is more focused than dispersing. Some texts differentiate between astringent and sour, which intuitively are not exactly the same notions. Texts also speak of thick and thin, heavy and light flavors. Tropism is the action of a herb on one or several TCM organs, or their associated energy channels or meridians. Traditionally, 12 organs or normal channels are considered. They're divided into 6 yin or 6 yang organs or meridians. They're listed on this slide. The organs themselves are associated with the individual 5 transformation elements. For simplicity, I've only shown the main yin organ correlations. That's to say, liver corresponds to wood, heart and pericardium corresponds to fire, spleen corresponds to earth, the lungs correspond to metal, and the kidneys correspond to water. To illustrate tropism, we will look at 3 cold herbs that clear heat and drain dampness. In this example, I will use a term roughly ascribed to 3 areas of the torso, which are called the upper, middle and lower burners, or jiao in Chinese. These correspond to the thoracic, abdominal and pelvic cavities. Huangqin acts on a number of organs: lungs, stomach, gallbladder and large intestine. But its strongest action is on the lungs, which are traditionally located in the upper burner or jiao. Huanglian, by contrast, is more active on the heart and stomach, which are traditionally associated with the middle burner or middle jiao. Finally, Huangbai is most active on the kidneys located in the lower burner. The 4 movements or directions. According to the classic literature, the actions of the herbs can give rise to 4 kinds of movements: raising, lowering, floating or sinking. The raising or ascending movement moves the qi in the body upwards. This will help the body expel wind and raise yang. The lowering or descending movement moves the qi in the body downwards. The floating or exteriorizing movement disperses and moves the qi outwards. The sinking or interiorizing movement subdues excessive yang. In general, the raising and floating properties are usually associated with the flowers, leaves or branches of the plant. The plants are usually pungent, sweet, warm or hot. This property is often influenced by the preparation method. Processing with wine or ginger will tend to encourage this property. Herbs with descending or sinking characteristics are usually roots and minerals. They tend to be sour, bitter, salty or astringent. Processing with salt can encourage this directionality. Toxicity. Toxicity is a very broad and important subject. Toxicity may arise at the source in a number of forms. Pesticides are often used to ensure economic output. Labeling errors and errors of identification, especially with more valuable wild-crafted herbs, are not unheard of. Problems in processing and problems of herb storage can contribute to toxicity. On the practitioner side, herbs may be inappropriately prescribed, which underlines the importance of the licensing of practitioners. Wrong dosage, wrong complementary herbs, and length of administration can have toxic effects. That is why a patient should stay in close contact with a herbalist when first taking the prescription and immediately stop taking them if there is a problem. A number of herbs were classically used in TCM that are now recognized to be unsafe for use. Both Western and Eastern alchemists were obsessed in past centuries with cinnabar and mercury as possible constituents for longevity formulas without being aware of their toxicity. Another example is the linkage between aristolochic acid and kidney cancer. Aristolochic acid is present in Madoling, Tianxiantang, Xungufang, which are all present in the classic Chinese pharmacopoeia. Extended use of these herbs would expose the patient to the possibility of kidney cancer. Needless to say, qualified herbalists are aware of these issues and would never include these herbs in your prescription, using suitable substitute herbs instead. A different form of toxicity is conditional on the form of preparation, as in the case of fuzhe or aconite. If used correctly, fuzhe can have beneficial effects. Ma huang or ephedra was used in certain formulas as a decongestant, but it has been banned in the United States after being inappropriately used for weight loss. For safety, these herbs are not used in the West, but they're still used in China in appropriate dosage, and if the doctor is confident that the patient will prepare the herb correctly. So it is important to make sure that you're being treated by a licensed Chinese herbalist and that your herbal supplier is serious. It's also a good idea to steer clear of Chinese patent medicines unless you are absolutely sure of their effect. There are a number of other important issues. Great care should be taken when herbs are prescribed for pregnant women, children, or epileptics. And many herbs will interact with Western medicines, so it is vital to be aware of all the medicines the patient is taking. In many situations, a herbalist should be working in direct contact with the patient's Western physician, although this can be awkward sometimes. As a final note, I should mention the importance of ecological criteria. No Western herbalist would prescribe an animal part from an endangered species animal. However, you can still find tiger parts on sale on the street in some Chinese cities. Equally unfortunate is the extraction of bear bile under very cruel circumstances. Given the strong beliefs still prevalent in society, these medicinal components can still sometimes be found, especially in the south of China, and their use should be strongly discouraged. As a final slide, I enclose a list of terms for plant components in Latin, English, and Chinese. You can pause the video to copy these terms if you find them useful. Thank you for watching this video on the basic properties of herbs according to Chinese herbal medicine. I hope you will join me for further videos in this series.